Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and this is the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. The committee mandate is the Public Accounts Committee is established for the purpose of reviewing the public accounts, the annual report, or other reports of the Auditor General, and any other financial matters respecting the public funds of the province. My name is Kyle McQuarrie. I'm MLA for Inverness and chairing this committee. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you to put your phones on silent. Should there be a need to leave the building, please exit through the doors onto Granville Street, right out here, and gather at the parade square. I'd like to ask the committee members now to introduce themselves, beginning with...
Good morning. I'm not Brian Wong.
Sorry, I recognize Chris Palmer.
No, thank you. I'm Chris Palmer, MLA for Kings West, temporarily filling in for MLA Wong.
Good morning. I am Tim Outhet from Bedford Basin, and he, him, or Tim. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Krista Gallagher. I'm the MLA for Halifax-Chebucto, and I use she, her pronouns.
Lisa LaChance, Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island, and my pronouns are they, them.
Good morning. I'm Danny McGillivray, MLA for Pictou Centre.
Thank you. Officials from the Office of the Auditor General, Legislative Council Office, and legislative committees are in attendance. Do I introduce you, or do you introduce yourself, Gordon? No, but needing no introduction, we have Gordon Hebb, Legislative Council, and Kim Langell, Committee Clerk, and you have no name tag. Sharon. Sherry, right. Sherry Mitchell. She got put in the corner for bad behavior. On today's agenda, we have officials with us from the Department of Growth and Development, Department of Municipal Affairs, Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities, and Nova Scotia Nonprofit Housing Association regarding provincial-municipal relations and support for housing development. I'd like to ask the witnesses to introduce yourselves, beginning with Trish McCourt.
Hi, I'm Trish McCourt. I'm the Executive Director of the Nova Scotia Nonprofit Housing Association.
David Mitchell, President of the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities.
Juanita Spencer, Chief Executive Officer for Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities.
Good morning. Valerie Pottie Bunge, Associate Deputy Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Good morning. Hardy Stuckless, Executive Director of Infrastructure and Finance.
Good morning. Chris Morrissey, Deputy Minister of Department of Growth and Development.
Good morning, Vicki. Elliott, Associate Deputy Minister with Growth and Development, and as well Chair of the Executive Panel on Housing and the HRM.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Thank you, and welcome all to the committee. I'd like to now invite witnesses to make opening remarks, beginning with Deputy Morrissey.
Good morning, and thank you. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here alongside my colleagues to discuss the importance of collaboration when it comes to addressing our housing challenges in Nova Scotia. I want to thank the members from the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities and the Nova Scotia Nonprofit Housing Association for being here today. You are valued partners, and a lot of the successes we've celebrated and the challenges we've overcome have been shared with many of you in this room today. This work cannot be done in a silo. It is all hands-on-deck approach spanning all three levels of government, private development, the community housing sector, and our valued stakeholders. I've had the opportunity to speak on housing in front of this committee several times now in the last few months. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the progress we're being made and my department's commitment to working in partnership across the housing spectrum to ensure every Nova Scotian has a safe and affordable place to live. Municipalities play a vital role when it comes to ensuring we have the infrastructure in place, the proper zoning, transportation support, and other amenities required to not only build homes, but communities. With the help of our partners, like municipalities and the NSNPHA, we've already met or exceeded every goal in our 5-year housing plan and in the first 2 years. And we're continuing to push forward. The work does not stop. We made generational investments, reduced red tape, created and preserved thousands of affordable units, and taken strong action to speed up development. We have proven success in delivering housing projects faster. We've removed barriers to help our construction sector and businesses scale up, and we are uniquely positioned to leverage our natural resources such as forestry to meet the demand. Together, we have created the conditions for over 68,000 new housing units. That's over 167% of our 5-year goal. We still have a tremendous amount of work to do, but we're starting to see the needle move. For example, housing starts increased 36% across the province over the last 2 years, and the vacancy rate has doubled to close to 3%. With the help of our community housing sector, we've been able to preserve or create over 3,000 affordable housing units from one end of the province to the other. This represents a $283 million investment in Nova Scotians in need. We are getting national recognition for our work, and Nova Scotia being chosen as one of the first province to partner with the federal government under Build Canada Homes is further evidence of that. With all this to be said, we know we have more work to do, and we are committed to the work. Our vision for the future is clear. Nova Scotians have access to safe, affordable housing that meets their diverse needs. We are truly Team Nova Scotia when it comes to making this happen, and I again appreciate your partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. ADM Elliott, do you have opening remarks? Mr. Mitchell, do you have opening remarks?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities, or NSFM, to participate in today's meeting. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of our membership and to share a few words about the provincial-municipal relationship in housing development. I would like to begin by saying NSFM is pleased to be the voice of all 49 municipalities in Nova Scotia. Our members are represented by over 370 municipally elected officials. They trust the NSFM to work in partnership with the province to advance their needs so that we can grow Nova Scotia and support our residents. The municipal relationship with the province of Nova Scotia, which was recently reinforced through the renegotiated Memorandum of Understanding between the province and NSFM in 2024, is one where a diverse range of community needs are identified and addressed through constructive communication, collaboration, and action. We understand that a strong relationship between municipalities in the province of Nova Scotia is and will continue to be a foundational element in determining how we collectively respond to the complex issues and challenges that our communities and province are facing each and every day. Like every relationship, both sides must always strive to find opportunities to work better together. We value the province of Nova Scotia's role in providing and unlocking financial opportunities that municipalities need to advance new and maintain existing housing, as well as the development of critical infrastructure that is necessary to support the progress of housing projects. We recognize that cooperation and ongoing engagement between all orders of government are critical to achieving successful outcomes, and our organization is committed to a partnership to achieve a shared vision of healthy and vibrant communities across Nova Scotia. And I look forward to contributing our perspective to this discussion and moving forward as a province together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. ADM Bunge, do you have opening remarks?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today about provincial-municipal relations and our shared work to support housing development. Nova Scotia is growing, and as our economy expands, our housing supply must keep pace. At the Department of Municipal Affairs, we work closely with the Department of Growth and Development, as well as our federal and municipal partners and organizations like the NSFM and AMANS to support that growth. Over the past 4 years, we've focused on cutting red tape, removing barriers to housing, and ensuring municipalities have the legislative tools, processes, and infrastructure they need to support development and create vibrant communities. While progress is being made, housing challenges remain, especially here in HRM. Together with growth and development, we've advanced legislative changes to streamline planning and accelerate housing, and we're seeing positive results. Implementation of the minimum planning requirement regulations are important examples of this work. These practical, forward-looking measures remove barriers and open doors for more homes to be built. The Municipal Affairs Policy Team works closely with Growth and Development to modernize legislation and create practical tools designed to help our municipal partners unlock housing supply quickly, effectively, and affordably. Collaboration with NSFM and AMANS helps to give municipalities a voice in shaping the solutions we bring forward. And our planning team works to provide guidance and support to municipalities so that local decisions continue to enable housing and enhance economic growth. As a department, we're also investing in the infrastructure that makes growth possible. Over the past 4.5 years, the province has committed nearly $500 million to critical infrastructure projects like drinking water, wastewater, disaster mitigation, accessibility, and transit. Investments that lay the groundwork for housing and form the backbone of strong, sustainable communities. And I can tell you during our municipal visits with the minister, we're hearing firsthand how those investments are making a difference. We know the need for infrastructure is significant, and collaboration across all levels of government is essential to ensure we leverage available funding opportunities. Working together with our partners, that's how we're supporting housing and laying the groundwork for communities that are vibrant, inclusive, and resilient here in HRM and across Nova Scotia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Ms. McCourt, do you have opening remarks? Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee today. I've been the Executive Director of the Nonprofit Housing Association since it was established in 2023. We represent over 50 community housing providers across the province who work in partnership with municipalities, the province, and federal programs to deliver affordable, stable housing in communities of all sizes. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Nova Scotia in many ways is punching above its weight when it comes to community housing growth and investment. The province demonstrated national leadership through tools like the Community Housing Growth Fund and the Capital Fund, and the Growth Fund is being looked to from other jurisdictions now as well. From a sector perspective, housing delivery does not succeed or fail at one level of government. It succeeds or stalls at the intersection of provincial policy, municipal authority, and implementation capacity. As the system has expanded rapidly, alignment and predictability have become just as important as funding itself. We also want to acknowledge the strong constructive working relationship that our sector has with staff at Department of Growth and Development. That collaboration has supported real progress in building sector capacity. Where challenges remain, they are largely about misalignment of policies, programs, and timelines. Municipal zoning and provincial housing programs are not always aligned for optimal development, and short-term, time-limited funding programs can make long-range planning difficult, particularly for nonprofit providers working through complex approval processes. These pressures also affect organizational capacity. For newer nonprofit housing providers in particular, prolonged uncertainty can strain volunteer governance, sometimes requiring boards to pause, refresh skills, and reposition before projects can move forward. Our members are not asking for less accountability, but for better alignment and predictability for this, so the significant public investments already being made can translate more efficiently into homes, protected tenants, and stronger communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before we move on to questioning, I'd like to give the two members that just landed the opportunity to introduce themselves. Mr. Burns.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Rick Burns, MLA for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Thank you, Chair. Ian Rankin, Timberley Prospect.
Okay, thank you very much and welcome. I'd now like to open the floor to questions, starting with the NDP Caucus. MLA LaChance.
Thank you. We heard, my first question is for the Deputy Minister of Growth and Development. So you mentioned the 68,000, creating the conditions for 68,000 new housing units. And I'm wondering if you could talk about what that means. So creating the conditions, that's not houses built, but what's that definition? And also, how are you defining affordability?
Deputy Morrissey.
Thank you for your question. As we started out saying that no one level of government or no one partner is going to solve the housing crisis, I'll ask my assistant deputy to talk specifically to the 68,000 different units. We're providing the right conditions to allow housing developments to happen. So that may mean certain things with respect to special planning areas that are being worked through the executive panel to allow development to go a little faster by whether we're contributing to some studies that may be required to speed up that process. The homes themselves to be built still need to be built. And so there's a lot of complications with respect to supply chains, availability of supply chains and labor. So we are putting the right conditions. We don't necessarily build all of those units. We have some responsibility for public housing, but certainly what we're trying to do is work with our stakeholders, and whether that's NSFM or whether it's municipalities or the nonprofit sector, of trying to create those right conditions so homes can be built. Vicki, would you like to speak something to the 68?
Sure.
ADM Elliott.
Thank you. So I guess to echo what the deputy said, what that means is exactly that. We can't get out there ourselves with a hammer and nail, as much as some days I think we wish we could, to speed things up. All we can do as a government is create the conditions either through legislative or policy tools, through partnerships, through designation of special planning areas, through the work of the executive panel. We work really well with municipalities. In fact, and I'll give a prime example of that, of how we create conditions. Our secondary suite program that we launched a couple of years ago, as you know, we were reaching for every tool that we could. We were in the middle of a housing crisis, and secondary suites was a quick and effective way to add gentle density. We worked with municipalities across the province to change their zoning rules to allow secondary suites, and the majority of them jumped right on board with that. And so without our program and their policies working together, that never would have happened. So that's a great example of how we create the conditions through our funding investments and other opportunities. As far as defining, as far as, you're
Thank
good?
you.
Okay, sorry.
MLA LaChance.
I'm sorry for the interruption. I do know you were going to my second question was about defining affordability, because I think if I look back to the provincial housing needs assessment, the report said that we needed 10,500 new homes each year, and we have actual homes occupied, and we have yet to reach that. And CMHC has now increased that number that we need 12,500, probably due to the delay of getting to the 10,000 goal. But affordability is a huge concern. And 68,000 units sort of in some stage of planning is important. But we need to make sure we're building houses for Nova Scotians that they can afford. So again, I'll let you answer, how are you defining affordability? And of the 3,000 affordable units, how many of those are currently occupied?
ADM Elliott, please.
So defining affordability, and I know we've had this conversation a few times in respect, it means different things to different people. And so we tend to have varying definitions of affordability by program. And so when you think about the housing spectrum as a whole, what's defined as affordable for somebody living in supportive housing is very different from somebody who defines affordability who's living in market housing. And so for all of our different program streams, we have differing eligibility requirements and differing levels of affordability. Under AHDP, it's 80% of average market rent. For public housing, it's 30% of someone's income, so it's rent geared to income. And then we use varying levels of eligibility. So for most of our programs, as an example, we use housing income limits, which vary by community and by region, depending on a variety of factors as well. So all to say, it's not an easy question to answer because it means different things to different people and varies according to a program.
MLA LaChance.
But isn't the CMHC definition across the board for housing, like as a principle, that 30% of income no more than 30% of income should go to your housing costs. And wouldn't that be an appropriate measure to use overall in terms of our housing plan in Nova Scotia? I'm also wondering if you could go back to the question of the 3,000 affordable units, how many have been occupied?
ADM Elliott.
Sure. So what CMHC says is that it's affordable to a household if they're not spending more than 30% of their income on housing. But again, if your income is $100,000 a year versus if your income is $20,000 a year, then you have a different, then the person making $100,000 a year has a different definition of affordability. And so that, I think that's why it gets a little complex. As far as the 3,000 units, I'd actually have to defer to Adrian Mason to answer that question, if he can.
I can't move to give you more room.
Mr. Mason.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. I think just to go back to the point and just expand on the definition of affordability and the 30% rule which you referenced, which is a concept that came out of CMHC back in the 1980s as a I guess looking for a simple answer to a complex question. You don't want to. You're not interested in that.
Yeah, MLA LaChance.
I do apologize. We have very limited time, and so we have had a chance to talk about affordability, and so previously. So, but the question is, how many of the 3,000 affordable units that the deputy referenced are occupied?
Mr. Mason.
The vast majority of them. So the 3,000 units that have been created or preserved, it's actually probably more like 3,500 actually, depending how far back you go, are units that have been built through the Affordable Housing Development Programme, or units that have been preserved through acquisition through the Community Housing Acquisition Programme. So anything that's been acquired is already occupied. Anything that's being built, obviously, depends which year it was. Anything that's been approved, for example, this year won't yet have been built, but they're currently under construction.
MLA LaChance.
So maybe I could ask for some follow-up from the department. The 3,000 that you referenced, how many of those are currently occupied as of the meeting today? Thank you. So in Halifax, from January to November of last year, 3,000 housing units were completed. But actually, less than a third of these were intended for home ownership. And I think we need to think about why are rental completions outpacing home ownership completions. One of the findings of the housing needs assessment was that only the top 5% of renter households could transition to home ownership. So are renters still locked out of home ownership today? And perhaps Deputy Minister Morrissey wants to start with that.
Deputy Morrissey.
Sure. Thank you for the question. And again, I'll ask for some of my colleagues to have a lot more information or details, or we can do a follow-up and provide you with some more data on that particular piece. So there is more work that has been done with respect to apartments or multi-unit residential units that was seen as a need at that point in time, and that was the focus of the many different levels of government working on this, and whether that's the municipality or the provincial government or nonprofit sectors. We have expanded that now, and we're working vigorously with respect to looking at additional housing stock to the single dwellings or other complexes as well. And there's lots of examples, such as up Mount Hope, working with the YWCA on developments like that. There's some announcements recently around Amherst, around some of these projects as well. So again, we're working with industry, working with municipalities to create those conditions. At the time, building many of those apartment complexes that you referenced to was a path of getting a lot of units fast. And so that was one of the key priorities, is creating as much housing opportunities as possible. We are now starting to work towards and getting momentum on some of those single dwelling homes that you're talking about, and trying to speed up processes where we can, make changes to legislation where we can to help speed up that process. housing, once developers get their permits, it still takes time to build housing. So I don't think you're seeing the immediate reaction, even though these things happen. There are supply chains. This is a complicated question and a lot of dependencies with private sector, public sector, funders. So it does take some time. We are looking on the economic side of how do we build homes faster through either off-site or modular homes. And so working with the modular industries and how we can build homes faster, because we also know that the trades are not filling the gap that we may need to build homes faster. And from a productivity perspective, this is very important for us as well, to work with organizations like the apprenticeship program to speed up making sure people do get qualified to do these things. So it is a long and complicated question, and there's many different stakeholders, and trying to keep everybody rowing the same boat together.
Excuse me, MLA LaChance.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think the amazing people we have in the room today demonstrate how complicated the process is. But I would like to hear from Ms. McCord. So you talked a little bit about some of the things that are hampering the growth of non-market housing, such as prolonged uncertainty. Could you talk a bit more about what's impeding the growth of the non-market sector?
Ms. McCord.
So when we talk about things like affordability across definitions, every program that exists almost has a different definition. So that's one of the areas of alignment of policy that is challenging for community housing providers. I would also suggest that rental housing really needs to be the focus. As much as we want to get more people into home ownership, that tends to only relieve the pressure at the higher end of the rental market. So what's happened over the last few years is we've had a lot of people who could afford rent, but they've been putting downward pressure on the lower end of the market because there hasn't been enough inventory. And so if they could get into home ownership, it would relieve some of that pressure. But really, what's going to meet the need for the most people in Nova Scotia with the greatest needs for affordability support is rental housing. So speeding up the process across levels of government and programs around policy alignment is really one of the most important things. What can happen is an application can go into one program. Most community housing organizations are stacking different programs in order to make their budget affordable for actually providing those affordable units. So as they apply to different programs, they may not have met all of the needs, and it stalls there while they're addressing what's within that one program's needs before they can move on to the next step. And one of the challenges is sometimes those programs come to their end of funding before all of the applications have actually been processed, so then they're sitting and waiting for a new injection of funds with a new budget. And all of those things, slowing the process down, has an impact on how the organization is able to move forward with their program planning. And that's really what ends up slowing things down at that end. So that's part of our role, is to help navigate all of those different pieces to help them figure out which to tackle first. Another area that tends to really slow things down with that process so that they can actually have keys that they can hand over to tenants is infrastructure in municipalities. Excuse me. So whether it be an increased demand on the infrastructure that exists, or in municipalities that haven't grown in a long time and suddenly need to, because we've seen the housing crisis affecting just about every part of the province, so very small communities as well. They're needing to actually develop new infrastructure in order for development to happen in areas that didn't have any residential development previously. So all of those different pieces are affecting that. But the definition of affordability is definitely a challenge because each program does have different definitions for different reasons. I think that there is, some effort to bring a little bit more cohesiveness to that, which will definitely help the process.
MLA LaChance with about 4.5 minutes.
Okay. So maybe I'll go to the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities. So what are you hearing? Where do you see the challenges in developing particularly non-market or affordable housing?
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes, thank you. So for municipalities, we don't construct housing. The barrier would be mostly around infrastructure, as Ms. McCourt noted. Communities that are growing quickly are reaching the limits of their current infrastructure. Communities that haven't grown are having to develop, as she noted, infrastructure in places where they don't have it in the ground. Municipalities across Canada carry 60% of the infrastructure burden, while working with 8 to 10 cents of the Canadian tax dollar. So it really comes down mostly to getting the infrastructure in the ground and updated. That would be for all housing, whether it's market or non-market.
MLA LaChance?
And just to continue on the question of infrastructure, and I'll go back to growth and development for this. One of the conditions, I guess, has been the creation of these special planning areas. But Nova Scotians, especially in Sandy Cove and Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lake areas, are very concerned about those areas being designated as special planning areas. They're areas of ecological significance and sensitivity, and people are also worried about infrastructure. So the traffic in those areas is already intense, but also thinking about they're not on municipal services. So it's a huge investment. So I'm wondering what evidence is being used to make decisions on where special planning areas should go.
Deputy Morrissey.
I'll start, and then Vicki will add in some more details with respect to that, specifically to the special planning areas that have been identified to help speed up the process. It doesn't mean you bypass any process. You still have to go through studies and development agreements and things that are required in order to meet the requirements. So we're not asking for any part of the process to stop or not be engaged. And so there's still lots of different processes. We're here to help to facilitate the faster identification of areas that could work faster. And to your point, there are lots of questions still to be worked out around things such as infrastructure that are required. But by identifying the special planning areas, we can identify where we can focus our attention and our resources to ensure that we can get to the development faster. Vicki, do you want to add anything else around those two areas?
ADM Elliott.
Thank you. Excuse me. So you asked specifically how they were designated and what evidence we use. So generally, in particular, the first round, so the one that you mentioned, Sandy Lake, came as a recommendation from HRM staff. It was designated as a future growth area, future service community back in early 2000s. And sat for a number of years, and so they brought it forward as a great opportunity. We talk about the need for single-family dwellings. That's a great area. That special planning area will accommodate a lot of single-family homes, and that's what we need to see. And as far as infrastructure goes, we work really closely with Link Nova Scotia. They have a place on our executive panel. We work incredibly close with Halifax Water. This is a very holistic effort. When we go into special planning areas, we ensure everything's covered, and we undertake the required studies. As you know, Sandy Lake underwent a 3-year study to determine what was required, and now we're working with HRM to determine how we're going to put those needed things in place.
With a little over 30 seconds, MLA LaChance.
And I guess Sandy Lake is a good example. So identified by HRM prior to a lot of the growth in the Hammonds Plains Road area, prior to a lot of the development pressures that have now emerged. And so I guess my question was around, evidence. I'm just wondering, in terms of ecological sensitivity and, habitat for salmon, part of the corridor that links the Chebucto Head with other important areas. Where was the environmental consideration?
Order, please. Thank you. And we'll now move to the Liberal Caucus, and I recognize MLA Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate everyone being here. There's a big crowd of people here to talk about housing, and We certainly talked about housing before a number of times at committee. I appreciate all the work that folks are doing. And my concern is around infrastructure and the growth around HRM as an MLA, but of course there's challenges across the province. And I have a similar question around the partnership that the province is willing to undertake relative to infrastructure. So we already have one of the biggest traffic concerns in the country that was noted recently. And yet we're adding 58,000 residential units around the periphery of HRM where the biggest pinch points are. That's why I was late today, and my colleague represents another area from out that way, and I venture to say that he had the same challenge getting in. But I want to ask the question because we have 16 designated planning areas in HRM and not a lot of talk about partnership on what's actually going to be built to help HRM that is already cash-strapped and is already undergoing challenges on how they're going to keep their own property tax at the level that they are. They're becoming unaffordable for people, everyday working families that are seeing their taxes go up year after year. And it's not just this year and the 10% that's going to be difficult to achieve, but it's the future projections of 10% each year that I've seen that will be compounded and force people out. So HRM can't afford to build the sewer and the water and everything that's required to actually service these areas, yet the province has mandated themselves as the person being in charge of approving these developments. So what is the province specifically planning to invest in infrastructure costs within these areas relative to the requirements, the rudimentary requirements around sewer and water, but also what citizens expect today in terms of sidewalks and active communities and road networks and needing to have land dedicated, I referenced that in the past, for schools, for emergency services so that we can build complete communities and not just approve massive unit scale.
Deputy Morrissey.
Thank you for the question, and I'm going to refer to my colleagues at Municipal Affairs to talk about specifically around some of the infrastructure. But what you're seeing around is growth, and growth for the city and growth for the province is positive from an economic development perspective. Inviting more industry to come in gets a larger tax base for us to get the services or gets the funding for us to pay for some of the essential services we want in either education, health services, or public services that you see day-to-day, police, etc. So all of this growth, there's pains with growth, and there's pains with trying to get alignment with all stakeholders to be aligned exactly on the same page. We're never going to have 100% of the people to agree on where exactly we should be headed at the right time. We are very focused on making sure we grow this province and grow the opportunities, the economic opportunities, so we can grow every Nova Scotian to have opportunities to work, live, and play in this province. On the infrastructure specifically, working with the executive panel, Vicki and HRM and Link Nova Scotia, are all looking at those growth opportunities to find what's the best path and most sustainable path for growth in the future, knowing that this city is growing faster than maybe some other parts of the province. But there are some other parts of our province growing as well. So we're trying to balance all of that with respect to that. On the infrastructure side, though, I'll defer back to our municipal affairs, who are working with many other stakeholders as well, I'm aware of, to make sure we're managing this growth and how do we help facilitate those conversations to make them happen.
Adrian, Bunge.
Excuse me, thank you. I'll just start with a couple of comments and then Hardy can get into more details about funding. There's no doubt that infrastructure is a major challenge for our municipalities and delivering it is increasingly complex. We have a strong focus on maximizing funding and getting every dollar available from the federal government and to make sure that Nova Scotia's interests are well represented at provincial and territorial tables. This government has made significant infrastructure investment, over $500 million in the past 4.5 years, and there's some provincial-only program investments, $28 million through grid. We've had $103 million in 23-24 and $32 million in 22-23. So there's been significant provincial investment in infrastructure, as well as maximizing and working with the federal government to get to maximize their dollars, and of course the municipalities who are also partners in those programs. And really this creates the backbone for housing and for strong, sustainable communities. Hardy, did you want to talk a little bit more specifically about program?
Executive Director Stuckless.
Thank you, Valerie. Yes, It's a complicated, complex issue. We are here to support. I think the theme today is relationships, and that's what we do. We have daily conversations with our municipal partners, with our municipal associations. I think we've had the strongest relationships I've seen in the 17 years I've been here. On this front of infrastructure, what we do is staging. So we listen to the municipalities and what supports they need for their water, wastewater servicing. They have different stages of readiness. So we have programs set up, like our annual provincial programs, to meet them at the front end. So if they need to do planning, design, they use that. Then once they're ready for that and they get a good sense of what they need to meet the capacity needs of their communities or their growth in their communities, then we have GRID, which is Growth and Renewal for Infrastructure Development. It's a $15 million program, does some kind of midway infrastructure or planning and design. Those lead into our bigger FedProv programs, which are like the Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund. So we just negotiated an agreement with the federal government for $171 million over the next 10 years. We'll come to the table about $140 million of that. It's a 40-33 split for municipalities that they can apply for their infrastructure needs. I can say, looking back since 2021, Valerie mentioned $500 million through the programs she mentioned. This is the Municipal Capital Growth Program, $103 million, $32 million through the Sustainable Services Growth Fund. The key of all these, the top priorities, housing development and growth, but we also have to have renewal for those communities that aren't yet growing, but they still have servicing needs on their old infrastructure. Sometimes to add infrastructure, you have to replace existing infrastructure because you have to upsize the pipes before you can actually add new homes to the system. They could all create delays in the network. So what we've done is we've created a pipeline of projects to meet municipalities where they're at. We've negotiated historical amounts of funding from our federal partners. We negotiated a $63 million Canada Community Building Fund, which MLA Rankin will do the things that you've mentioned. There's 19 eligible categories municipalities get their allocation. They can spend it on what they feel is their priorities. That includes transit, that includes roads, sidewalks, active transportations, water and sewer. So that's what we do. We listen, we adjust our programming, we make it available as best we can, working alongside our partners and our federal colleagues as well. We negotiate agreements with them.
MLA Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And there's a lot of high-level numbers there, and I agree the federal government has to be a partner in some of the major projects, but we're looking at significant approvals without specific commitments to upgrades. And the province has, I submit, a larger role in being a bigger player, especially when it comes to transit, because the road network just can't handle tens of thousands of more vehicles coming into the urban core. Is there an opportunity to actually up the game for the province to participate in what's needed? I already talked about HRM's constraints. And what is your understanding of how much support the province actually gives to municipalities relative to other major cities across the country? My understanding is we're not providing the type of percentage of support to municipalities. Maybe you can comment on that.
ADM Bunge.
For transit questions, I think it would be better suited to be answered by Deputy Hackett with regard to the actual transit network. We do get federal dollars towards transit, and there are some projects that are specifically allocated to transit, and you might want to speak to some of those. Excuse me.
Sure, you want transit? I'm sorry.
Executive Director Stuckless.
Sure. Okay. So the one program that we have, and it's ongoing till 2034, that includes transit is the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. Through that program, the federal and provincial governments have funding streams, one of which was transit. It's fully committed. In the transit stream, we have committed $133 million across the province for transit infrastructure, leveraging $235 million of federal dollars. Though that funding goes to 4 transit providers. Now, that was a requirement of the federal government. They used those 4 transit providers that were members of the Canadian Urban Transit Authority. They include Halifax Transit, Cape Breton Transit, King's Transit, and Yarmouth Transit.
MLA Rankin.
Yeah, and that's all one-time funding. Like, I'm indicating greater support for operating. If we're going to actually implement like rapid transit, which we need for a grown-up big city that we're becoming. I know you're not in a position to commit to big things like that from your positions, but I do think that the province needs to play a bigger game. But maybe I can ask, what is the status of the development of each of these 16 special planning areas?
ADM Elliott.
Sure. So currently we have over 10,700 units approved through development agreements of the over 60,000 designated at this time. And the rest of them are in various stages of development and planning.
MLA Rankin.
And in the act that legislated the executive panel on housing, there's a date of November 25, 2026 to dissolve the panel. Just wondering, with the purpose of the panel to address urgent housing supply challenges and to accelerate and increase the supply of housing, I'm just wondering, will the panel be null and void with its work to assist when we approach this date, or will they be around to continually address the concerns post-November 2026 after all these units are approved?
Deputy Morrissey.
Thank you for the question, and Vicki, you can add in here as well. The legislation that was established set that date as the date, and so that's what the date that we're working towards. We continue to work with all partners, whether there's legislation in place or not, to continue to work on how we can fast-track housing and the need for housing throughout the entire province. We are working towards that end of date of 2026, and if things change, we'll adjust and adapt accordingly.
ADM Elliott.
I do want to comment that the creation of the executive panel has strengthened the collaboration. I think a lot of people perceive that it's created some rub. What I would say is I've learned more about planning and development in the last 4 years than I ever thought that I would in my career. We work incredibly well with our HRM colleagues at HRM, and within the special planning areas, even beyond the length of the panel, whenever that does end, I don't foresee us stopping that work together. We'll continue to create room for legislative changes that are required to expedite housing. Legislatively, anything that has started under a special planning area that was designated by our minister will continue to see to the end by our minister. So he would continue to make approvals in areas that already have development agreements and so on.
MLA Rankin.
Thank you. But was the sole purpose for putting that panel together to designate special planning areas?
ADM Elliott.
No, it was broader than that. And so special planning areas is one of the tools that we have in our toolbox, but as well, the purpose was to expedite housing in other ways. And so back in 2022, we had Deloitte come in and do a barrier review. We're still working through some of those recommendations. A lot of them are complete. We've created a lot of room within our legislative changes to expedite housing where we work. It's created relationships with Halifax Water and strengthened those. So the mandate's very broad. It's generally to expedite housing within the HRM, and we do that through a number of our tools.
MLA Rankin.
Thank you. I'm not disputing that there are good relationships amongst the group, but what kind of oversight can we expect with such massive projects after the conclusion of the panel's work and the significant requirements of infrastructure that we need? And nobody is saying, Deputy, that we don't support growth. We need the growth. It's about managing the growth. And despite the minister being interested and continuing to follow, what kind of collaboration do you expect, and is there specifics around a branch within your department that will be managing and truly partnering with municipalities?
Deputy Morrissey.
As I stated off, and not to be repetitive, but no one department and no one level of government is going to fix the housing problems that we do have. And so we'll continue to help facilitate, whether it's through municipal affairs or whether it's through any other department that we're working with on affordability of homes, construction of homes, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of housing throughout this entire province. So the partnerships that I have developed, as Vicki has stated, with the executive panel has been very focused and specific on HRM, and we've made a lot of very good progress. But that work will continue to work throughout the future. And again, as was mentioned, it's one tool in the toolbox. There's many other tools that we need, whether it's from a financing perspective or whether it's from a planning perspective. We're here to help facilitate and coordinate and manage that progress.
With about 4.5 minutes, MLA Rankin.
Thanks very much. And with the special planning areas, there were some sessions. I want to understand how public feedback is informing government's decisions to move forward on housing developments in these areas.
ADM Elliott.
With special planning areas, the designation means that our minister takes the place of council, so all other due diligence aspects are followed through on. And so because public consultation is part of the normal process of HRM, that continues. And so you'll see public consultation sessions hosted regularly within those areas. There's online feedback provided that then comes back to the executive panel and informs our further steps from there.
MLA Rankin.
Just a broad question. I think it'd be municipal affairs. Are you concerned with the significant increases that Nova Scotia HRM residents I'll speak to will face with property tax increases this year and forecasted year over year?
ADM Bunge.
I think that's more of a question for the municipality than it is for our department.
MLA Rankin.
Well, what percentage of the property tax bill is provincial that goes to the provincial coffers?
ADM Bunge.
I would have to get an answer to that. Okay, I would have to get back to you.
MLA Rankin.
Yeah, my understanding is it's 30% of the tax bill that is specifically going. The former councillor, I think, said it across the way, and so. How much of that 30% of the tax bill is increasing for residents in HRM? How much of that provincial money is increasing and going to the province to help fund services?
ADM Bunge.
I'll have to get back with the answer on that question.
MLA Rankin.
Okay, yeah. So I think that's would be helpful so the committee could know the percentage of a property tax bill, because it's not widely known among residents, and a lot of it funds education, but it's increasing year over year, and the province has an obligation to support municipal units, especially with explosive growth in the capital region and others. I think this has been a discussion at the Federation for some time about how the province can step up and support. And when people are seeing their taxes go up, they should understand that it's partially provincial that taxes are going up. So I'll just end my round with that.
Thank you. And we'll move to the PC Caucus. I recognize MLA Wong.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I appreciate the work that you all do. I know it's a big task, so I have a couple of questions to start with you. So this is for Department of Growth and Development. Could you please describe some of the recent initiatives where the provincial government has worked with the municipality to accelerate housing?
Deputy Morrissey.
As we started out, thank you very much for the question, MLA Wong. And Vicki, you can jump in here with some more details as well, specific to some of the programs within the housing unit. Certainly, the significant amount of work is opening up the right conditions to fast track to get 60,000 different housing units started in the sense of making sure there's a path to make sure that we can get them going, and then working through the processes of making sure we work with the supply chain, et cetera, to make sure we get them being built. The executive panel has done a lot of work with the designation of the 16 SPAs and working with development agreements to make sure that those are in progress as well. Another good example is collaboration around short-term rentals. The provincial short-term rental program works with all municipalities with respect to compliance and enforcement through data sharing and other partnerships to increase efficacy in provincial municipal compliance efforts. So since the provincial registry, from only about a year ago, 1,400 short-term rentals that were potential long-term dwellings exited the short-term rental market, potentially adding to the supply of housing. So this is just an example of some of the different policy changes that we can do in working with municipalities of how we can free up some available more housing stock. Within HRM, streamlined approvals, subject to council approval, of course, development charge waivers and property tax exemptions to support rapid development of 930 units. At Shannon Park, as an example, that was just recently announced before the Christmas time period. It's also another exciting way of where we collaborate both with the federal government, the municipal government, and the provincial government to get that development started. That site has been around a long time. As the minister has stated, it's finally nice to see that we're going to start seeing playgrounds being built, homes being built, and people living in that community once again. Another good program is in Amherst, where we showed how all three levels of government came together with the United Way. The announcement was just last week, and the excitement there around creating new affordable units. The Groves at Hillside, again, it's working with modular homes to get those homes built faster. That will have 47 homes when complete. 28 of them will be sold under a shared ownership model between the buyer and United Way. And again, we had a lot of anecdotal stories coming back to us from the United Way last week about this is having a significant impact in the stories created by some of those people living in those homes. They would never see a path of home ownership if it wasn't for this program. And a good example of working with the nonprofit sector, working with three levels of government, and how we can do this together. Do you have other examples you want to share? We can go on and on. There's so many partnerships. I just want to, we can do more work, and there's more work to be done. But working with the municipalities and working with the nonprofit housing sector is just an example of how we can work together. We're not just relying on the private sector to fill the gap here. And we're getting very creative. I come from the nonprofit sector. I know how creative they can get, and they can leverage. They're there for the values proposition and the cause. And they mean it. When they want affordable housing, they're going to go do it. And whether it's the different organizations, and I don't want to name them all because I miss some, but they're a very important part to us building the housing inventory for Nova Scotians.
ADM Elliott.
I'll just add two examples that come to my mind. Land for housing is a great example. So we have land parcels across the province, and municipalities have worked with us to upzone those properties to allow more density. As a great example, they work really closely with us on that. And when we announced our community housing acquisition program, the first property purchased was through the Housing Trust in HRM, and HRM actually provided tax release and committed to doing so for other CHAP purchasers. So I think that those are great examples where the municipalities and province comes together and work closely to not only expedite housing across the province, but innovative solutions to providing affordability as well.
MLA Wong.
Thank you. That's a comprehensive list, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of cooperation with municipalities, and when there's a crisis and you need to build housing quickly, I know that builders have solutions that are very innovative themselves in the way that they do things. I'm wondering what are some of the innovative things, and maybe the land for housing is an example of that. But what are some of the innovative solutions that you've been able to work with municipality to create housing faster?
ADM Elliott.
Sure. One I'd say we're incredibly proud of would be the Southdale Mount Hope project. And so, as you know, that would have been designated a special planning area about 3 years ago through the Executive Panel on Housing, through, again, a joint collaboration between the municipality of HRM and the province. And as we move forward in that special planning area, Clayton used, they use off-site modular construction And so when we talk about innovation, speed of housing, shovels in the ground, they've got that nailed. And so they're putting houses up. Within a few weeks, they've got a couple of blocks of housing developments. They're moving foundations in, and then they're directly following the Prestige Homes is under them as well. So then they move in their modular developments. In addition to that, they have partnered with the YWCA to create affordability in that development. And so the YWCA accessed the funding under our Affordable Housing Development Program, and they are now supporting vulnerable families in that special planning area. And layered in is that HRM provides tax relief to the YWCA to do so. So I think that's one of probably our proudest examples of where everybody comes to the table to put housing in place fast and provides affordability to those families who are most vulnerable.
MLA Wong.
Thank you for that. It's interesting to drive by, and you can actually see those houses being piled on top of each other, which is, or the units rather. So very interesting. Thank you for that. I'll pass my questions along to my colleagues.
MLA Elliott.
How much time do I have, Chair? I know you're not good with math, but
12 minutes.
How long?
12 minutes.
Well, I can do that. All right, thank you very much for being here. You're becoming regular presenters, and it's nice to have our guests here today as well, and thank you. So we're talking a lot about collaboration and how we have to work together. And Deputy, as you've said, that no one order of government or no one group is going to solve this problem. And it's great that we have this growth, because this growth, of course, allows us to have the user base, the tax base, to do the types of things like we talk about rapid transit, et cetera. So it's exciting time for me, and certainly for Link Nova Scotia, who's working on some of these things. Give me some examples, if you might, though, on where provincial support has made a difference to a community housing project where it might not have been possible in the past. A little bit of...
Deputy Morrissey.
I'm going to start with the star of this show to tell these stories is going to be Adrian down on my far right. Adrian runs our housing programs and is working directly with these clients. I know he's busy because I signed the documents. And so there are many different stakeholders that he's working with respect to programs such as Land for Housing, the Community Housing Growth Fund, the Affordable Housing Development Program. So Adrian, maybe if you can give a couple examples of how these programs and the impact they're having on some of the stakeholders we're working with.
Mr. Mason.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. Yeah, I think we recognise we need more housing of all types across the province, but certainly we want to make sure we're growing and sustaining the community housing sector. It was one of the core pillars within the housing plan, and we've had some unprecedented investment into the community housing sector in the last 5 years. Just to put that into context, in 2020, the total investment into the community housing sector was about $6 million. Over the last 5 years, it's averaged close to $60 million, so it's a tenfold increase. And in fact, this year, we're currently tracking at over $83 million. So it's unprecedented investment into that sector. In terms of specific examples, yeah, I could be here all day, so I'm just mindful of the clock. We've very purposely developed programs to try and align as best we can with other levels of government. We've tried to create programs that allow all types of opportunities to come forward. So starting with sort of capacity building, we have the Community Housing Growth Fund. That's already committed $1.1 million this year to community housing groups to help them with capacity building, to help them with planning and pre-development work, to help them with innovation and research, for example. Some community groups would prefer to acquire existing housing units rather than build new. It's obviously a little bit easier to buy existing housing units. So we introduced the Community Housing Acquisition Program in 2022. Already well over 900 units, I think it's 940 units have been acquired through that program. We've lent just over $65 million. We have a program in place to help then repair those units. Often they tend to be sort of older stock. So the Community Housing Infrastructure Repair Program, that's committed just about $6.5 million this year to repair about 138 units of existing housing. And then in terms of creating new housing, the Affordable Housing Development Program and the Land for Housing Program have both been extremely useful. I mean, the Land for Housing Program was mentioned earlier, but is a great sort of synergy with how the province and municipalities work together. You know, they have the local knowledge that we don't have in terms of assessing the suitability of land before we put it out, invite proposals. You know, knowledge around infrastructure, knowledge around, you know, service capacity, zoning requirements, etc. And we invite them into that process. The municipalities work very closely with us. And we very much consider that a partnership. Already over 1,200 units have been approved through that program. And the Affordable Housing Development Program is our main funding program to help create new units. It's, I think in the last 5 years, it's created about 1449, I think, is the total number of units created through that program. All of which rely on all levels of government, quite honestly. You know, the province certainly is playing its part, but we do rely on municipalities to help where they can, whether it be provision of land, grants, property tax relief, and the federal government through their lending programs. So, you know, recent announcement includes, the Deputy mentioned earlier, a project that was announced up in Amherst last week, which was a great example of all three levels of government coming together. Over $600,000 was provided by the town of Amherst for that particular project. And yeah, the nice thing about that is it goes back to one of the conversations earlier around home ownership, and it's going to allow 27 people to actually own a home for the first time. Another example of a project that was announced recently was down in Liverpool, in Queen's County, 32 units. Again, significant support from the municipality, from the province, and from the federal government through the various different funding streams. As I said, I could probably go on, but hopefully that's answered your question.
MLA Elliott.
I enjoy it when people are passionate about their work, so thank you very much. I'm going to shift gears for a moment and put a question over to our friends from NSFM. And I know with my background and also things that we've heard that municipalities have expressed in the past that they want more and earlier engagement with the province on financial decisions and other decisions. It seems like we are developing some better cooperation and relationship with the NSFM, but we can always improve on those things. What are some opportunities that you see to strengthen our collaboration? And that could be either for Juanita or David, but yeah.
Mr. Mitchell.
For there we go. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I would say right now we have a very strong relationship with the province of Nova Scotia with regular contact. Certainly, I'm only a few months into my role as president of the NSFM, but I quickly gained an appreciation for just how often the CEO is engaged with her counterparts provincially. Constant communication probably describes that adequately. Being at the table early in the decision-making process is key for us. In certain aspects, we're required under the Municipal Government Act to be given 12 months' notice, so that is important to maintain. Municipalities cannot have a deficit, and so if there are changes, we need to be able to plan that full year out so that we are prepared for that. But in terms of collaboration and cooperation, I think we're pretty well yoked together, and I'll turn it over maybe to Juanita to describe more about how that happens within her office.
Ms. Spencer.
Thank you for the opportunity. I would say actually that Dave, President Mitchell here, really hit on it. We do have regular contact with counterparts and colleagues at municipal affairs and other departments. We have regular, at the very minimum, we have monthly meetings, but we do keep in contact throughout. And I think that's a really important piece to understand what's going on for us to be able to share in fairly real time the issues that we're hearing from our members and bring that back to through the province so that we can have open dialogue and try and advance the issues that are impacting our members and finding the solutions that kind of advance all of our agendas in a quick way.
With 3.5 minutes or so, MLA Elliott.
Thank you. And can you give me some examples where the collaboration has improved and made a difference? I'd love to hear that. And I'm desperately trying to find, because one of the last budgets I was involved with, the province actually took away some of the things that we used to collect on behalf of the province. So we actually saw a reduction in that 30%, and I'm darned if I can remember what program it was. But if you happen to remember that, that would be great as well. But just give us some examples of where this collaboration has improved and made a difference.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yeah, so just to your other part, through the service exchange agreement, you're right. We did have some items that were kind of removed from the municipality, and Juanita can probably speak a little bit more in detail. Even if we don't have that, we can give you specific examples. In terms of the cooperation and collaboration, the one that really is coming out as a huge win for us is that the province delivered some funding to the NSFM for some staffing opportunities that led us to open up a funding portal that can be accessed by municipalities. So not every municipality has the capacity to have a grant coordinator or a staff team to access different funding programs. And so this has been a huge success, just recently launched. And I think in the first month we had over 1,000 access points to that funding portal, which I think demonstrates not just the need, but the success of that. So. And the province has again delivered funding for multiple staff positions for us to kind of unlock some resources for our municipal members. I don't know, Juanita, if you have a little bit more.
Ms. Spencer?
Thank you. So the funding and navigator position has been in place for a few years now, but we just did a revamp, as Mayor Mitchell just mentioned. And in that time, I guess in about 2.5 months, we've had about 20,000 page views and 4,500 unique visitors. So it is a very well-used resource, and we are incredibly appreciative of the funding for that position. Our members are, but it is far beyond, it's used far beyond municipalities. Other nonprofits, other orders of government, and that also use that. So it is certainly a great success story in terms of something to be offered out there. The service exchange, there were a number of items in there, and I don't want to miss anything on that, but there was certainly corrections was one of the items that municipalities used to collect on that no longer are the responsibilities of municipalities to collect on that piece. There is a piece around obsolete schools that, again, back to the province to take over that responsibility, which is a really important piece for our membership. I just want to speak to that whole process of the service exchange. It really was a collaborative effort. The previous service exchange had been in place, I think it was like almost 29 years. It had been in place a very long time. I think it was 95. And it's certainly overdue for a revamp. And we were partners at that table. And those are the types of tables we like to be at with the province.
Excuse me.
Thank you.
We'll now start the second round of questioning with 12 minutes per caucus, and I recognize MLA Gallagher.
12 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I just have a few questions, specifically for Ms. McCourt. We've talked a lot this morning about the supply that we need to add to the market, but I have a question about preserving existing supply, especially our supply of affordable housing units. As I understand it, Halifax alone lost 8,000 affordable homes between 2016 and 2021. And I think our vacancy rate of affordable units is at 1% in Halifax. What could we be doing to make sure we're not losing affordable units faster than we can replace them?
Ms. McCourt.
So The acquisition program is really essential to that, as well as the capital fund that was created. It's really important for nonprofits to be situated so that they can act faster than the market in order to actually acquire those properties before the market does, turns it over, and the rent increases, which is a huge part of where the affordable units are being lost for sure. So continuing those programs, increasing investment in those programs, and the process for our organizations to be able to access those programs being streamlined as much as possible is really important. And also finding ways to make equitable access to that so that organizations in smaller communities are able to access those funds quickly. But that pre-screening kind of process that happens with these programs is really helpful to that.
MLA Gallagher.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to switch a little bit, and my colleague spoke about this briefly earlier. For the Department of Municipal Affairs, in 2021, one of the first moves that this current government made was to grant municipalities the ability to require affordable units to be included in new apartment buildings. Yet last year, the minister said that no municipality, to his knowledge, had used this power. And so I'm curious why municipalities haven't used inclusionary zoning.
Who's the question for?
Department of Municipal Affairs.
Okay. ADM Bunge.
I don't have any information on why it hasn't been used. I was just thinking my colleagues at NSFM might have heard more about why that provision hasn't been used. Certainly our job at Municipal Affairs is to provide municipalities with the tools and the regulatory authority in order to do the things that they need to do. So I'm not sure why it hasn't been used specifically in various municipalities, but we could certainly work with our colleagues at NSFM to find out why that provision hasn't been used and to see whether or not it needs to be tweaked or modified.
MLA Gallagher.
Okay, so it hasn't been used, but we don't know why it hasn't been used. So there must be some sort of barriers in place to enter that program. There's just okay. Okay, moving on. Halifax Regional Municipality has asked for the ability to apply an additional tax on vacant lots zoned for housing. And this idea could help encourage development on land that's centrally located and already near infrastructure, like roads and transit and water services. What is the current status of this request? And yeah, let's start there.
ADM Bunge.
Thank you for the question. We work closely with our municipal partners to help ensure their communities have the support that they need to grow and be successful, and we are always looking at ways to remove barriers and speed up housing development. We are cautious about measures that could increase costs or affect the feasibility of housing projects, and at this time, we're continuing to consider it, the value and the possible impacts of that tax.
MLA Gallagher.
The Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities, I'm curious if there are any additional powers or support from the province that municipalities would like to see to help increase housing production.
Mr. Mitchell?
I don't have a specific answer in terms of what each municipality would want. Collectively, it's just an ongoing conversation we have with our members, but I don't have a specific request that we've received from municipalities related to your question. Sorry.
MLA LaChance.
I'll stick with Mr. Mitchell. So, there were municipal amounts identified in the housing needs assessments for how many units were needed in different municipalities. And I'm wondering, is that being tracked? I understand that there was a shortage of 245 homes in Bridgewater at the end of 2022. Have these homes been built? And how can progress be made in supporting municipalities with their specific challenges?
Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you. So as the NSFM, we don't collect that individual data from municipalities. So I wouldn't be able to speak with my NSFM hat on, municipality by municipality in terms of the needs assessment. I would say that for a lot of them, it comes back to the infrastructure question. So if your question was about Bridgewater specifically, like most municipalities, growth is happening, so homes are being built. So across the province, we do see progress, but I couldn't give you specific numbers municipality by municipality based on the housing needs assessment.
MLA LaChance.
And so in that case, you know, how is NSFM tracking progress? Because I think we had some numbers from Halifax, but yeah, how are you measuring in terms of access to affordable housing across the province?
Mr. Mitchell.
Yeah, so as the NSFM being the advocacy body for the 49 municipalities collectively, we wouldn't be gathering or collecting data like that for individual municipalities. That would be their responsibility to collect and report.
MLA LaChance.
And so for the Nonprofit Housing Association, I'm wondering too, you talked about, some of the things that are needed in terms of aligning definition of affordability, and other things that could happen to, keep ahead of the market in terms of, protecting affordable housing. I'm wondering what you see as the impact of the rental cap and the use of fixed-term leases in terms of affecting the supply of affordable housing.
Ms. McCourt.
So I guess each member organization may have different feelings about it, because the rent cap also affects our nonprofit organizations, right? So that affects their overall budget in providing units, and every one of them has a different mix of how many affordable units they have. Some are almost 100%, and they're talking about meeting that core housing need. So they have a budget that requires a lot of injection of funds, whereas others have more of a mixed model where they would have some units that are deeply affordable, some that are meeting core housing need, and some that are closer to market rent in order to make that work. Sorry, what was the specific question you had?
With 3 minutes, MLA LaChance.
The impact of the rent cap and the use of fixed-term leases.
Ms. McCourt.
So with the rent cap, it's hard to say. I think that when you look at the rental market, it's definitely better than having no rent cap and having rent going up by 20%, which there are ways that some developers have gotten around, not developers, but landlords have gotten around that with fixed-term leases. And so with fixed-term leases, we wouldn't suggest that they need to be stopped altogether. We have members that actually need them for very specific reasons, whether it be students that only need housing for 8 months or those kinds of things. But there's definitely loopholes that I think could be closed that would prevent private market from getting around different regulations by using fixed-term leases. And another part of that is tenants being educated about what their rights actually are. So some don't know that they can actually contest when there's an increase that's more than what the rent cap would allow, and those kinds of things with a fixed-term lease. Even if they're given another lease from the same landlord, then the rent cap should apply, but it doesn't always.
1.5 minutes, MLA LaChance.
And I just want to go back actually to probably Ms. Elliott in terms of the vacancy tax. So this is something that I really saw, in Halifax. So, when I was elected in 2021, almost immediately there was a whole bunch of affordable housing doors that I had been on, doorsteps that had, people were living in satisfactory conditions along Roby Street, Coburg Road, that were demolished and remain vacant sites. So this is, student housing, but not only student housing. And is there a timeline for the department to conclude its consideration of allowing for vacant land tax?
ADM Elliott.
That would actually be my colleague at Municipal Affairs. Thanks.
ADM Bunge.
Thank you very much for the question. We are still looking at it and considering it, like I said earlier, just to make sure there's no unintended impact on housing projects. So, thank you.
MLA LaChance.
So I guess so. There's no goal for when that decision will be made. I guess I would encourage the department to look at this, and I think elsewhere, in HRM, we've seen things like the Bloomfield site that was dangerous.
Order. We'll move now to the Liberal Caucus, and I recognize MLA Rankin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just curious if the department, I guess it would be municipal affairs with potentially housing growth, same language in terms of vacancy, but I was curious with the discussion around rent caps, are we tracking the vacancy percentage in the province or an HRM or both? Because I think that really should be a huge part of whether the rent cap is adjusted or removed to really see investment in some of our housing stock. That's, I think, something that makes our position and our party different than the NDP, who advocate for a permanent rent control system, whereas if our vacancy percentage grows and grows and grows, the market forces can help provide alternatives for people to move and find affordable housing. And so I agree with the government's objective to grow private sector supply, and I wonder how much we're really looking at the aggregate data around vacancy percentages.
Executive Director Stuckless. Is it? Oh, sorry. Deputy Morrissey.
Thank you for the question. So we are looking at the vacancy rate by different regions because there's different growth in different parts of the province. We're also looking at the economic activities, again, as that's evolving and changing, on where are the opportunities where that more population growth may happen because of developments in Department of Defense and Aerospace, an example, significant investments in places like Greenwood, Coast Guard facility potentially in Cape Breton, and here in Halifax. And so as this additional information is being inputted to us, we're constantly looking at those variables to say, what would that mean to the environment that we're currently existing under? So we are looking at vacancy rates by jurisdictions and also from a provincial perspective. We are seeing the positive trend that vacancy rates are rising both in the city and across the province. We also have programs in specific areas, again, to address issues such as student housing and healthcare workers. And so we've been able to activate programs to make sure we've got people who need necessary homes to have that supply readily available. There's a huge need and demand, but we're trying to work very closely, both from an economic development perspective, knowing that economic development will drive more population growth in some areas or not, and how we can facilitate to make sure we have all things, not just housing. There's other business incentives to make sure things are there running properly. So,
MLA Rankin.
Yeah, so I guess you answered it that you are tracking, but do you have that data that you can share, or an estimate of where our vacancy sits today?
Deputy Morrissey.
Province-wide, our vacancy rate sits at 2.6% is the number we have. It may be lagging by a month or two. I'm not quite sure how often we get it, but that's currently at 2.6% and has doubled in the last number of years. It was at a low of 1%.
MLA Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's helpful. What do you consider a healthy vacancy rate for market conditions? Is there a range that you're looking at or an objective or goal in mind?
Deputy Morrissey.
The market intelligence shows that between a 3% and 5% vacancy rate is an appropriate number to be looking at. You get higher than 5%, obviously that's going to put some downward pressures on the supply chain to look at capital infusion into whether they need to build more. Obviously, the same thing applies when it gets down below 3% or lower. It has the opposite effect of that there's not enough homes for people to be living in, or the appropriate amount of homes available for people who want to live in the right location.
MLA Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also helpful, and I think it's important discussion around looking at market conditions. And we're hearing about a lot of apartments anecdotally that have very high rent that are unaffordable, but yet we still have shortage of single detached for people to purchase, and a range of options for affordable housing is limited. And so when we hear about landlords that are engaged in affordable housing needing to sell their units, there's a 19-unit building in Dartmouth that talked about high property tax being one of those issues. I talked a little bit about what's causing that, and how a part of that is provincial, but also it was referenced the province's lack of support and incentive to preserve privately held affordable housing. And so just wondering if there is an opportunity for the province to be more engaged in supporting and facilitating private affordable housing, because that particular landlord wasn't able to keep up with the rent needing to be increased because of his obligations to Canada Housing Corporation. So in terms of that market failure, if you will, is the province, is there an opportunity for the province to step in that regard?
Deputy Morrissey.
Thank you for the question. I think when opportunities come to our attention, we engage with either the nonprofit housing sector or other organizations to help facilitate or help try to problem solve some of these challenges that happen. And there have been programs that have been developed that Adrian talked about, whether it's land for housing or for other programs, for us to make sure we try to keep as much of the affordability stock that's available to us existing, and that it doesn't go away. Increasing housing supply has been a huge priority right now, but we have other tools in the toolbox to help facilitate the affordability of housing for Nova Scotians.
MLA Rankin.
Thank you. And one of those tools was, or is, the Community Housing Acquisition Fund. Ms. McCourt referenced the value of that, but also other nonprofits have been talking about it lately with budget season coming up, and it was a pilot project, I believe, in 2024. So is there a commitment for that fund to be an ongoing commitment? Since we're close to the budget, will that fund that's important for nonprofits continue?
Deputy Morrissey.
The budget's not official yet, so I can't answer that question. I don't get to decide that. I get told, I think, more or less how that works. But obviously, we do program evaluations on all of our different programs to see what can be the best effective tool to use at the time, what's the best return on investment. And from a departmental perspective, I can tell you internally, my housing staff, some of which are behind us, but some of them are out in the field doing the God's work with respect to making sure we keep this work going, is certainly advocating that we need more of this, and we're trying to put levers in place to make sure that we're putting the right tools in place to grow the housing supply, either through the nonprofit sector, the public sector, or the private sector.
With about 4.5 minutes, MLA Rankin.
Yeah, okay. And finally, I just want to touch on value for money. That's what the committee is really supposed to delve into. And I just wonder, you mentioned return on investment. So are you looking at every dollar spent and how many housing units are actually developed? Like, do you have any data to support, like, not just approved or housing starts, but completed constructed units relative to the money spent by the province?
Deputy Morrissey.
I would say we have some internal data that we do use to look at the return on investment, or what is the cost of acquisition for a house, as an example, with the nonprofit sector, and that's how we help evaluate where to direct our funding from a departmental perspective and what's being most effective. The tricky thing with the many different programs is the housing system is complex, and so whether it's existing stock, new stock, working with the development of special planning areas. All of these things have different triggers. We also have lots of creativity going on with the private sector along with the nonprofit sector. Again, Mount Hope, Amherst, the announcement last week with the YWCA, the fact that we're providing is not a large number, but it's impactful in a small community like Amherst to have those number of units available, and the stories that you'll hear from the people who are in those homes and living in those homes now going, they never dreamt of living, having their own home. And these are the things we're doing. So there's incremental work we're doing to make sure we're going to have an impact across the province, but there are several of those. Again, as new funding comes online as well with the federal government, with Build Canada Homes on development and access to more capital, that's a really important part of the total equation as well. But let's not kid ourselves. We don't have an unlimited amount of money to do everything for everybody. And so with budget limitations that may be required, some tough decisions will be made, I think, across the board, federally, provincially, and municipally. Those decisions are being made actively in the public space right now. And as taxpayers, I think we're all concerned with respect to growing costs and making sure that we're meeting the needs of all Nova Scotians.
MLA Rankin.
And are you assessing the funding approval relative to housing completion, so the timeline of when it's actually approved to completion, and has that improved?
Deputy Morrissey.
That's a great question, and as I repeat myself, of housing is complicated, depending on whether it's a special planning area that may require something much more complex, or whether it's something that's maybe something much faster, like acquisition of existing housing stock. What we're trying to do, both from a housing and economic development perspective, is how do we build more homes faster? And so whether that, again, is programs to incentivize getting more apprenticeships trained up faster, or whether that's working with off-site builders, or whether that's working with the industry as a whole of trying to figure out this equation. So there are different metrics, different programs that we're looking at and evaluating, and constantly looking at quality assurance or quality control of how can we improve the services to the taxpayer to improve meeting the standards that's required.
With about a minute, MLA Rankin.
Okay, I think that's. I think I'm good there. Thanks for the good work you're doing.
Thanks for your questions.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to the PC caucus, and I recognize MLA McGilvery.
Thank you, Chair. I've worked most of my life in the nonprofit sector, so most of my questions will be for very interesting here from Ms. McCourt. We'd love to hear more about your organization, how it was created, what are your core functions, and the initiatives you have underway.
Ms. McCourt.
Thanks for the question. So the association was formed after a provincial initiative that was, so there was both the province happening, the Affordable Housing Commission was struck, and at the same time, St. FX Extension Branch Coady Institute started a project looking at the community housing sector and what the sector needs to thrive. And that was the Build Together project. Those kind of both timed around the same time, coming out with recommendations for a sector support association. So we formed I was hired in October of 23. The association was officially registered in April of 23. And we were a part of the Community Housing Growth Fund being established. So there was a fund carved out of the Community Housing Growth Fund specifically for the startup of the association. And since then, we've also been able to access funds through the Growth Fund around capacity building supports. So our primary mandate is to help with capacity building with our organizations and to provide a collective voice on behalf of the sector. So we've now got a planner on staff who is working with organizations to help them with some of the very early stage work that they need to do. So we're mostly working with the organizations that are either very new or developing for the first time in a long time. And we're helping them with things like figuring out when and if they can access the Community Housing Growth Fund, which stream is appropriate, and in some cases helping them to put an application together for the very early either capacity building or planning and pre-development funds. We also provide some educational opportunities ourselves and do some work just helping to bring the sector together, doing, we have housing networks that we've formed across the province. We also hold monthly members meetings so our members can come together. And we have associate memberships, so we have members aside from our nonprofit housing providers that come from municipalities, from community health boards, individual service providers like affordable housing consultants are associate members, and it's important that we have that because that's also bringing them together with the nonprofit housing providers to see how they can support the work that's happening. And one of the things that's been really important for us to talk about is that more housing is really the solution to homelessness. And for our organizations, the majority are really looking at the needs in the market that are at that end of the market, the very deeply affordable. So when we're talking about various things like vacancy rates and growth in communities, we need to get a little bit more specific and look at the vacancy rates of the affordable end, which I would suggest haven't moved at all. Most of the vacancy rates would be at the highest end of the market. And so we're working with our members to help them to make the case and justify the work that they're trying to do to build more affordable units within their communities. And I think the other part of our role is really building that awareness that we're there, that we have nonprofit organizations across the province, and that they really need to be part of the process at the very beginning. They're the organizations that are going to address what community needs actually are and have a probably better understanding in some cases of what that mix looks like and how there are potentially more homeless people living in one community than are even known because they aren't all necessarily attached to service providers that are reporting that homelessness. So it's a whole lot of different things, but I do think one of the most important things is really bringing the message that there are many community organizations that want to be part of the conversation early on and have the capacity to help with those solutions.
MLA McGillivray.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the important work you do. As I think you're aware, I was the founding chairperson of the Petite County Affordable and Supportive Housing Association, PCASHA. That was in the spring of 2024. PCASHA is a member of the Nova Scotia Nonprofit Housing Association. PCASHA right now, so when I was still chair, we sourced some funding for the Nova Scotia Community Housing Growth Fund that you mentioned for capacity building. We'd formed a strategic plan, board recruitment. I left in the fall of 2024, and at that point the board was just starting to meet, the new board. They seem to be in a place where they're kind of stuck now, because you need assets in order to build and things like that. I'm just wondering what the NSNPHA might be able to offer member organizations to help advance affordable housing solutions.
Ms. McCourt.
So the planner that I mentioned that's on staff that is our capacity building and program coordinator is really the best point of contact for organizations like that. We're currently working on a plan to develop a resource hub where we will be able to provide consulting ourselves. And I expect most of that consulting will happen at the very early end of any kind of work that needs to happen. The majority of the organizations that are really growing with larger numbers of units have a lot more capacity than most of the other organizations do. And so most of our work is definitely in that area, but she can sit down with a member organization, find out exactly what the vision is that the group is looking at and help them figure out where they are in the process. And we can even help with things like looking at the organizational readiness to move on to that next stage, whether we're the ones doing it or connecting the organization with the right resource to do so. So I would suggest the best thing that we can do is just sit down with a member and talk with them and find out exactly what they're hoping to do in their community and helping even to determine what you might need to do is in terms of determining the needs and the feasibility of providing that solution.
With about 4.5 minutes, MLA McGilvery.
Thank you. As I used to be the mayor of the town of Stellarton, and in about 2017, we formed as a founding chairperson for that Pictou County chapter of the Habitat for Humanity. I'm wondering if your organization works with community partners. I don't know if Habitat for Humanity would be a partner of yours or not, but how do you help, I guess, community housing partners in rural municipalities address the affordable housing crisis that we're in?
Ms. McCourt.
So Habitat are members of the association, and we've worked with organizations that were also trying to work with Habitat on different things. I think the role that we have to play that's the most useful there is around the housing networks that we've formed, where we're providing the space for a region to come together and talk about what's happening in various communities and how they can support each other and partner and provide those things. And if those people aren't at the table, then our role can be to support the network and bringing those people to the table to at least start that conversation and talk about ways that they can work together. The other thing that that we're doing is through different education programs that we're offering, we are looking at things like at our last education day, we had someone come and talk about partnerships between organizations and how at various levels of partnership that's really helpful to building more housing. One of the things that's really challenging in rural communities is you're talking about smaller numbers of units to be built, and that lower number often isn't a high enough volume to be able to then be able to do things like hire a full-time property manager and maintenance. And so often, especially with really early stages where it might be 6 units that's owned by an organization, it's the volunteers that are doing that work, which means that volunteers are on call 24/7 as a property manager. I mean, if a pipe bursts in the middle of the night in January, it has to be addressed immediately. And so one of the things that we're encouraging and trying to find ways to support ourselves as an association is how we can bring organizations together to work together on those things. So maybe they'll share services between 2 different communities where they have one property manager that is able to support both organizations, or maybe the organizations need to come together more closely and actually merge under one umbrella so that they have more capital that they're able to leverage. So there's a number of different things like that we are exploring and trying to provide education around so our members have different options that they can consider.
With about 1.5 minutes, MLA McGilvery.
I guess I'll ask if MLA Burns wants to ask a question.
MLA Burns.
Thank you. I wanted to ask the Department of Municipal Affairs just quickly to circle back to infrastructure funding. If you could share what the province's role is in supporting the municipalities and in receiving funding, assisting them to ensure that the funding is available, and if they have any oversight in that process.
Executive Director Stuckless.
Thank you for the question. Our role in infrastructure funding, well, one is to be clear. One is to listen. So we listen to our municipal partners and what their needs are in case we need to tweak upcoming programs to make sure that we're meeting their needs. Clarity in the requirements for the programs for when application intakes are coming out. Clarity through partnering with the NSFM to utilize their fund navigator position as well to point municipalities to us should they not hear from us through our other means, which is we have a listserv through the Association of Municipal Administrators of Nova Scotia to make sure that when we do have a new program or an intake is coming, that this hits the CAOs, this hits the directors of finance, all their administrative staff. We have information sessions again to explain the applications, what the program objectives are. Then we have the intakes. So if there's questions on whether or not something is eligible, our engineering team will help them, or a program administration team to walk them through.
Sorry. That concludes the questioning for today. And I'd like to thank the witnesses for coming and sharing all of your knowledge and experience. Thank you very much. Is there anyone that would like to make a closing statement? Deputy Morrissey.
If I could, first of all, just thank you for all the questions. They are helpful for us to be effective in doing our jobs, and we do take your questions very seriously with respect to making sure we provide the right information to you. The second thing I want to state is that there have been improvements, and so housing starts, annual starts are on pace in 2025 to double the total since 2021. Resident permits reached historic highs of almost 9,500 in the first 11 months of 2025, signaling a durable supply of pipeline to the future. Vacancy rates have doubled, gone from 1% in 21 to 23 to 2.6%. Community housing sector, this government has invested $283 million in community housing sector that's created or preserved over 3,000 affordable units. There's a pathway to over 70,000 new homes created. Work takes time, and collaboration takes hard work. And so without the people at this table, it's a big table, without the people behind us and the many people supporting, whether it's the nonprofit or NSFM or the public housing agency, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people working together to try to solve this problem. And so I just want to have a big shout out to all the people behind the scenes who don't get to have a statement here, but are working vigorously 24/7 and trying to make sure that they make an impact for Nova Scotians across this province. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other closing statements? Okay, well, thank you very much. That concludes questioning now. And we'd like to take a 3-minute recess to allow the witnesses to leave and say goodbye. Everybody ready? We'll be calling the meeting back to order shortly.
So is
Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order, and we have committee business. The first item is permission for OAG videographer. The OAG has requested that a videographer be permitted to take video at an upcoming PAC meeting. This is for the 5-year anniversary of the AG in Nova Scotia. I'd like to open the floor for discussion on that. Okay.
No issue?
No issues? Okay. Well, that's the last item of business. So the next meeting date is February 11th, 26, in camera, the Office of the Auditor General, and this is regarding the 2025 report of the Auditor General Financial. If there is no further business, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.